So the talk this afternoon is going to basically look at some best practices around home repairs. What we have been trying to do with this particular series has been to provide some very specific information and support to individuals who want to age in place. What we know is that more than 90% of older adults indicate that they would like to continue to live in their own home. So our objective with this series has been to try to provide some additional information to support that. In terms of home repairs, some of the best practices that we want to talk about this afternoon are the difference between hiring and finding licensed contractors and somebody who is just a handyman who may or may not have the skills that you are looking for and or the credentialing. Another thing that we want to focus a little bit on is how you pay people. One of the important things to know is that if payment is made by check or a credit card, it is much more easily tracked if in fact we have to track the individual to whom you made the check out to. Giving people cash basically means that it's a little easier for them to just walk off with the cash. Another item that we want to talk a little bit about is how you pay them and what you pay them up front. And whether or not you pay for the whole job or how you sort of stage those payments. A fourth thing gets a little scary for people, and that is to really look at a contract or have some type of a work order with descriptions about what is going to be done and understanding what that looks like. Another thing we'll talk a little bit about is permits. And what types of jobs require permits and what types of jobs don't. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit as we go through this about insurance and what kind of support, if you will, that you could get if there is insurance. So the first thing we're going to talk a little bit about is hiring the contractor. We really recommend these 10 things as different ways that you might begin, if you will, on the tedious process of having to hire someone to do some home repairs. The home repair could be very simple things like fixing leaky faucets, excuse me, or it could be a bigger job like replacing a door, or it could be even bigger jobs like replacing sidewalks or driveways or those kinds of things. So a very good way to start is usually to identify multiple agencies or multiple contractors who in fact can provide you with estimates. Having done a lot of this work over the years, both as a landlord as well as a homeowner, one of the things that I can tell you is that there is usually great variation, or oftentimes between different estimates. The important thing when I am looking at an estimate is that I am also looking at what kinds of materials are you talking about using? Is there any uniformity among those materials? Are they looking at what costs are they looking at? How many hours are they looking at to actually do the job? So having multiple estimates from multiple contractors is usually a very good idea because it gives you a range of what's out there. The other thing is that it can help you with your consumer shopping, because as you're probably going to tell me, and I know I've been on the receiving end of this many times myself, is I don't really know, because it's not my area of expertise, what goes into or what kinds of supplies and what kind of product is really out there, say, if I'm having new gutters put in. Do I want plastic? Do I want metal? Do I need straps? Where do I need the straps? How often do I need the straps? Do I need the little curve piece of the gutter? Does it need to run away from the house? How long does that need to be? So part of your, if you will, your due diligence not only in identifying the contractor, but can also come in the form of getting more information about kind of what the standard is and what we're looking at to have this work done. Another thing that we highly suggest is that if you can find local licensed contractors to do the job, contractors who are in town for a specific period of time, they are usually individuals who are much more suspect of doing work that is not necessarily at the same level. They may not be familiar with the local building codes. I always am very suspicious when I drive into a neighborhood and there is a contractor's sign that says new roof put on, and it appears in a 2 or 3 block area 6 or 8 times. I'm always very suspicious, unless there's been a serious hailstorm, say, for example, whether that many people really needed a new roof. So the advantage of hiring local licensed contractors is that if they are licensed, we can find them through the Colorado Division of Regulatory Agencies, and we can file complaints and we can get their license number, and we have the support of the state government to help us, if you will, if further action needs to be taken. Another really important thing is trying to get some idea about what the past work has been. Now, we always have to be really careful about this, because why would I give you a referral? Why would I provide the name of somebody who was going to not give me a good reference? So again, trying to figure out what kind of work they have done and whether or not people are in fact happy with that work, whether they would hire them again. A little bit later, I have a couple of tips for us to follow as well in terms of checking on people's past work. Another thing to be, excuse me, to be really methodical about, if you will, is to take your time in terms of making a decision. Most of the time, these bids or quotes that you get are usually good for a 30-day period. That is usually a standard time frame, because that's the vendors or the contractors believe that they can probably get the materials that they need and have the labor available at the price that they have quoted you. So while 30 days might sound like not a lot of time, it should be enough time that it gives you an opportunity to compare the estimates you get, to be able to talk to contractors and to be able to make a decision. The decisions that you really want to avoid is somebody who walks in and says, you need to make a decision this afternoon, or I won't be able to honor this price. Tell that person that they need to be walking on, because that's not someone that you are interested in doing business with. Even if you've had a really, really difficult time identifying someone and that seems to be your only option, do not take it. Listen to your gut and exercise caution. If you are hiring contractors, most of them have some type of a liability insurance. Some of them may also be bonded. What liability insurance basically does is it says that if the individual does not provide the services that they said, if there was some problem with the services, if something happened and there was fraud, or if there was bad materials used or whatever, you then have the individual's insurance company and the name of the insurance to be able to file with the company and file a complaint. It's a really good practice to try to get a copy of these insurance certificates. Anyone who is very hesitant to provide you with this type of insurance should also give you pause for saying this may not be someone that I want to do business with. Bonds are less frequent. A bond basically is something that is put up by a bond agent for the specific purpose that says that if there is a default, if there is a problem, then basically you can cash in the bond to be able to remedy or fix the damages. That is a little bit legalistic, but this next section here is really where we get into the legal part of this. And that is getting a contract. A contract is something that is legally enforceable by the courts. And the thing is that you can have a legally binding oral agreement, but it is much more difficult to prove in a court. So that is why we suggest that you get it in writing. Now, one of the things that these workmen also like to do is that they like to use their own shorthand. And they might just put a very general statement like fix the toilet. Well, fixing the toilet is great, but does that mean that you're going to replace the existing toilet? Are you going to put a new seal in? If you find additional problems, how are you going to manage that? So for example, if the flooring underneath the toilet needs to be replaced. And obviously you won't know that until you pull the toilet, but what you want in terms of this written estimate, this written bid, this written contract, is that you want an itemized list of the services that they are going to provide. You also want to look on this document, and it may just be look like an invoice. It may not be a fancy 20-page legal document, because that gets pretty overwhelming. And most contractors, unless they're doing really big jobs, are not going to have that. But another thing that should be on that form, or whatever it is document that you receive, is that it should tell you what the terms of the payment are. So the question is, do you pay upon the end of the job? Are they going to send you an invoice and you will pay within 15 days, within 30 days? Are you going to be able to pay with a credit card or with check? What form of payment do they accept? The other thing that you want to ask about is whether or not there are any guarantees in terms of this work. So do they guarantee that this is going to be for 2 years, for 1 year, for 30 days? There are also multiple types of guarantees. So for example, if you have to put in a new furnace, the furnace itself is going to usually come with a manufacturer's guarantee or warranty. So one of the questions you want to ask is, especially for these warranties or their guarantees over a short period of time, is, a long period of time, is that if you sell the house, does the guarantee go with the house, or is it only to you as the original purchaser? In addition to these guarantees that might be on the materials themselves, there then oftentimes or sometimes is a guarantee on the work itself, so that you have the opportunity, if there has been faulty workmanship or craftsmanship, to be able to call them back and have them review the work and then come to an agreement of what's an acceptable standard for that work. I know it takes a lot of energy, but quite frankly, you need to be very actively involved in this process. Another thing that should be on this on this contract or this form or whatever is something called a right to cancel, which means basically when can you cancel the work and no longer be liable for any of the incurred expenses. Can you cancel up to 24 hours before they start? Can you cancel after the first day if you're not happy with the work that's being done? And if you decide to cancel, sometimes you can cancel for no money. You just cancel because you don't want to continue to have the work done. sometimes there's a penalty involved in this cancellation. So again, understanding what this penalty might be. Do you forfeit the money that you've put out for materials? Do you pay for the day's labor? What is it and under what terms do you forfeit that, if in fact there is a penalty? Another very big no-no is never, 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 never pay up front. Now you may be asked to pay for some of the cost of materials, but you are not paying for labor up front, and you never pay until you're fully satisfied with the job. If you pay prior to being satisfied with the job, most likely there is never going to be any opportunity to remedy any problem that you may discover after the person has left the job site. It's pretty normal, especially in today's world, that whatever the time frame is that somebody said they were going to do this work, that you may anticipate some delays. These delays happen for a number of reasons, especially right now with COVID. But the other thing is that we have a lot of supply chain problems. So just because we are having, say, new doors put in, we may not get the shipment of doors for 2 months. We may get one door and not the rest of the doors. So again, expect those delays. But as part of those delays, then you will, each time there's a delay, you will want to go back to this original contract or this form, this invoice, this bid, or not invoice, this bid or this estimate, whatever it is that you have, you will want to make an amendment to that. You will want to make a change that says that this work is being delayed or whatever the change is. It's also important to keep all of this information and keep it very organized. Keep it in a folder, even if you don't understand it, put it in a folder, because it's a lot easier for me or somebody else to help you sort it out if we have all the paperwork. Having only part of the paperwork makes the individual's job harder if in fact there are issues. So when you are hiring and managing the home repair, there are two types of contractors. So there's a general contractor who is a generalist, and this usually is a company that will do like a major renovation or build a new product or build a new home, put in a new sidewalk, put in a new sewer system. And usually if you hire a general contractor, they then are going to hire all the specialists or the subcontractors. The subcontractor then is really the specialist. This is the guy who's the tradesman, and he's the guy who does the basic work. So he could be the excavator, he could be laying concrete, he could be a roofer, a plumber, an HVAC guy, the finish carpenter, the painter, the flooring, any of those kinds of tasks. That is usually the job of the subcontractor. Usually, if you can get really good people, these people are well trained. Many of them have been to school for that type of work, and they've either completed some type of an apprenticeship or an actual technical trade kind of school. When you want to, trying to decide when to use a contractor, usually this is really dependent on the size and the scope of the work. So if you're looking at some like major home repair or minor home repairs, like leaky faucets, replacing light switches, fixing a refrigerator or a dishwasher, putting new steps or rails on a porch, gutters, downspouts, those are a little bit different than basically a big job, is what I would call it, or one that requires a permit. So these minor home repair things, somebody comes in and they just, they have the skill set to fix whatever it is that you need, and they are on their merry way. When you are doing a larger project, say you're upgrading your electrical, you have to put in a new furnace or an air conditioner, you're moving walls, you put on a new roof, you need to put in a new fence, a sewer, fix the sidewalks, put in a new driveway. All of these kinds of jobs require what's called a permit. And the permit has to basically be issued by the local building department or whatever the name of that area is in the county or city where you live. Sometimes if you do an upgrade, say you had to you have a furnace and you're going to add an air conditioner, you may or may not need a permit. Most of the time on like an air conditioner, you probably would need a permit. Any new work is going to require a permit. The purpose of the permit is basically to ensure that the work is being done to meet the building codes of either the city or the county where you live. The purpose for these building codes, if you will, is to make sure that there's minimum standards. So for example, I was actually hearing this morning an interview on public radio with the governor, in which they were talking about maybe some new building codes in Boulder County as a result of the fire, and how the buildings might be constructed, what types of rock might be used around the structures, what types of drywall would be used, etc. When you have work done that requires a permit, it's going to be done by someone who is licensed. At least that is the person who is going to bid the job for you. They may have someone who is an apprentice or who is in training actually do the work, but the contractor or the subcontractor who is licensed is the entity that is going to have to go down to the building department and file the plan of work. They are the people who will ultimately be held responsible for not only paying the fee, but doing the work per the building standards of the city or county where the work is being done. The other thing that happens when you have a permit is that the city or the county will then send out an inspector. He or she will come to the job site when the work is done, and they will approve it or not, depending on whether or not it has met the requirements of the code. And if the work is not done up to code, then the contractor or the subcontractor, at the insistence or direction, if you will, of the inspector, is then required to redo the work. So I talked a little bit ago about when you're looking at contractors to check their license, whether you're doing a contractor or a subcontractor. So the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies is the part of the state government that is responsible for keeping a list of all of the individuals who are licensed in the various trades and professions. This goes all the ways from doctors and lawyers, all the way down to HVAC people, beauty salon individuals. So there's a large group of people who are licensed. And I did provide you with the link to the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. So when you get the slides, if you would like to check somebody's license, you can do that. It's important to remember that the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies licenses people. The health department licenses businesses or the Secretary of State. So when you are hiring this contractor or a subcontractor, some other things that you will want to work out. So we talked a little bit about the legal requirements and making sure that the individual or the company is bonded, licensed, insured, whatever it is that they have. What you're mostly looking for is licensing and insurance. Bonding is less common. And then you want the scope of work. You want that itemized. You want to know when they're going to start, how long they expect it to take, and how it's going to be paid for. But there's some other things that you want to do as well. So one of the things when you are hiring people is who is going to clean up each day. If they are in the middle of the job, who's going to clean that up? The last time I had a roof put on, they were a terrible mess because they didn't park their truck close enough to accept all of the torn off shingles. And so I had shingles everywhere. If you are looking to have a new roof or a new furnace put in or a new toilet put in or a new kitchen sink, kitchen faucet, all of those old items need to be disposed of. And because they are what they call building materials, these are not items that you can dispose of through your regular trash. All of these things have to be disposed of in a manner that is, again, meets state requirements. And certain things are held to a different standard than others. So for example, a furnace, disposing of one of those is very different than disposing of a kitchen faucet. So you want to know who's not only cleaning up, but who's going to get rid of the old stuff and how is that happening? So make sure that you ask that question, make sure it's written on your contract or your agreement or whatever that's called. Another thing you want to make sure about that you ask about is how is your home going to be protected from harm or contamination? So things like replacing a toilet, there's probably not much harm. But if they are replacing new windows, and one of the things that you want them to do is to make sure that they don't let a whole bunch of cold air in. So, and are they going to do one window at a time? Are they going to do more than one windows? What happens if, in fact, they break a window frame or the door frame gets broken when they put in a new door? So those are things that you want to make sure that you know how that's going to get fixed. One of the things that we recommend that you not do, but sometimes there's no work around it, is whether or not you are going to give workers access to your home when you are not there. We highly recommend that you not do that, but sometimes there's no way around that. But being present in the house is really, really important. If you do not feel comfortable being in the house with the worker, it's really important that you get somebody to be there with you. Again, because your gut is telling you that something is wrong and you need that protection for yourself. If in fact, once you start the job, you either identify something else that needs to be done, or if they find something that needs to be done, say, for example, they did pull a toilet and the wood around the toilet that it sits on is pretty rotten and they're not able to use that and they have to replace it, that's called a change order. And you will want them to write that down and what they expect that that's going to cost and how the materials are going to be secured to do that. To hire a trustworthy contractor, always check the status of their license. If you're hiring somebody who is not licensed, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Do your absolute level best and do not give up. Understand what's in the contract or this work order and what work is trying to be done. And another thing is to try to get references on their past work. So as I said earlier, getting references from somebody who's going to give you a good reference, that's usually not very helpful. But what we have today with the help of the internet, and even if you're not very internet savvy, I would suggest that you get somebody to help you. So there is a website called Home Advisor, and that's one source where you can get recommendations, if you will, from about certain contractors or vendors. There's another website called Yelp, where people frequently will rate different businesses and their experience with them. Similarly, if the business is a reputable business, oftentimes there's star ratings associated with that business. Now, understand that those star ratings can be somewhat manipulated. So they may or may not always be as accurate as one might like, but if a business owner gets a negative review from a client, usually that stays there. Other places to find things are neighborhood newsletters like Mayfair Neighbors or something, which is where I live. Friends and family are another way to get this information. So I said earlier that I wanted you to get bids and evaluate these estimates. So as I said earlier, it can help you to do your due diligence. But the other thing that a bid does is it gives you the opportunity to define the work that needs to be done. And it's okay if you got an estimate and then by the time you got to a second or third estimate and you thought that something needed to be changed on the original estimate and you like the first guy or you're leaning toward his work, call him back and ask him to come out and estimate that piece of the work in what you are doing as well. This estimate really is the beginnings of your written contract that will identify what is going to be done. Without that written document, whether it's on a bid sheet, whether it's on a quote, whatever it looks like, that needs to be a binding document. It should be signed by you and it should be signed by the contractor. Those signatures then allow you, should you need to go to court, to be able to say we had an agreement and this is a legal agreement enforceable by a court of law. The other thing that this document does, as I said earlier, is it itemizes the different tasks to be done. Now, there is a little bit of a difference between a bid and a quote. A bid is basically an estimate. It says, this is what we think we're gonna do. Asking for a quote basically means that you're gonna tell this person, I want you to build this fence and I want to know how much it is you're going to charge me to build this fence, excluding materials or including materials, depending on how you want to set that up. So the guy says, I will build you this fence for $1,000. If he takes longer to build the fence, because when he started digging, what he discovered was that there was a lot of rock that he was not expecting when he was putting in the posts. And it takes him 5 days longer than he originally planned. He still has to do it for that amount of work. You always want to pay when the work is done, whether it is a quote or, again, a bid is only an estimate. So then you're paying on an invoice. It's also okay when you get a quote to ask for an invoice at the end when the work is done. Now, it's pretty standard these days to be asked to provide an advance for materials before the work will begin. Our goal is usually to not pay more than a third down to be used specifically for those items. Now, another way that you can get around this, and I have done this many times, is you can go to a local vendor and you can get the materials yourself. And then you can provide them to whoever the contractor is or the subcontractor. The advantage of picking up the materials yourself, or at least purchasing them yourself, is that you know what you have purchased, you can control those prices, and there is not additional time added to your work to actually go to whoever the vendor is and pick up those items. So it can save you some money. Plus, a lot of vendors will also do a markup. So say if I go to Home Depot or Lowe's and I can buy a toilet for $100, if somebody goes there and picks one up for me, they may charge me an extra hour labor, but they also may charge $150 for that toilet. So if I was going to save some money, what I might do is, rather than having them pick up the toilet or whatever, is I may go there, pay for it, pick it out, pay for it, and then have them just go by and pick it up, rather than if I'm not able to pick it up myself, which many of us don't have the equipment to do those kinds of things. Now let's talk for a few minutes about the unlicensed home repairman. Even this individual should give you a quote for the entire job. Again, I would prefer that you get a quote rather than a bid. The advantage, as I said earlier, is the same as before. A quote says, I'm going to replace this toilet for $200. That's the amount of money that I will charge you. An estimate, he's going to charge you an hourly wage. I think it might cost this, but if he runs into problems, then he might also charge you extra. Another way in terms of the unlicensed repair people is, and you can do this with licensed and unlicensed as well, is again purchasing the materials yourself. The most important thing for the unlicensed work that you might have done is to really monitor what work is being done. You want to make sure, as best you can tell, that they're not taking any shortcuts. Again, you may not know what they're supposed to be doing, but don't worry about making them nervous and standing around and watching while they work. What you don't have in the unlicensed guy is you don't really have any recourse. If the unlicensed guy is not doing good work or standard work that meets industry standards, and you want to file charges or sue or go to court, you don't have any recourse. So that's why you, in many ways, have to be much more involved in actually monitoring and supervising and overseeing the work. Another thing you want to do is make sure that you get references. And again, you can use the same sources that you would have used for the licensed people. Now, what are some of the risks of hiring unlicensed contractors? So basically, you as the homeowner end up being held liable if there are usually any injuries that are happened on the job. So let's say, for example, that this fella comes out and he's going to install a new furnace. And say, as part of moving the old furnace, we didn't get the pilot light off. Really dumb, stupid, but say then that he gets burnt as a result of not getting the pilot light off because we didn't turn the gas off. Well, now all of a sudden he's been harmed, and you as the homeowner may find yourself liable for his medical bills. There may be other bills associated with that as well. You may also find yourself liable for other types of charges associated with that. Sometimes when you have an unlicensed person or somebody who's not well trained, is that you may have to pay for additional repairs. So let's say, for example, you have somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and they come in and they put in some new electrical wire. And now you have, say, for example, you're trying to sell the house. Well, the new owner or the new buyer or the proposed buyer says, I would like an inspection. So now you have an inspector come out and he finds that the new wiring, it does not meet code. So now you've not only had to pay the unlicensed guy, but now you have to get a licensed guy to come out and put in the new electrical as well. Sometimes the unlicensed contractors can also hurt your property value, because if they ask, if a new buyer or new potential buyer says, was this done by a licensed person, and you can't produce that, then they may not accept say your sale price that you have new electrical or new plumbing or whatever. You also might be held liable for damages to third parties. So this could be, say, for example, again, going back to the furnace, and say that the guy not only forgot to turn the pilot light off, but he also forgot to turn the gas off. So now there's a small fire in your area. And this fire may have damaged, may not only hurt people, but it might hurt your property. It could even hurt the people next door. Xcel Energy might be involved, and so it gets really nasty. Other risks of hiring unlicensed repairmen is oftentimes unlicensed people may not know what the current building codes are. So one thing that's important is, again, to try to make yourself knowledgeable about what the code is. So again, codes are not so important when you're replacing a toilet or a leaky faucet, because those are pretty standard. But if you're putting in plumbing, if you're putting in sidewalks, if you're putting in fences, those things, there are very specific code requirements. And the codes in Denver County may be very different than the codes are in La Plata or in Bent County. So knowing what the local codes are is important. There's usually consistency among municipalities in metro areas, but not necessarily. Other things with unlicensed people is that sometimes we've actually seen that these are past criminals who are looking to pay a quick buck. They may or may not have any skills or expertise at anything other than setting up damage to your property or looking for ways to break into your house. Sometimes unlicensed people will also not finish the job. And when that happens, then you have to either find somebody else to come in and fix it. Again, that's where you find yourself paying double. Sometimes an unlicensed person will quote a really low price, and then they just keep adding on. But I need an extra 20 bucks for this or $100 for that, because they either A, didn't know what they were doing, or B, the other thing is that they didn't really understand the scope of the job that they were working on. Most of the time, these people are not going to be insured. And if you ask for copies of insurance, you will also find that they will not be able to produce those. One of the other things in terms of home repairs is to be aware of is scams. So these are people sometimes who just knock on your door and they say, hey, I'm in the area. I noticed that, your lawn needed to be fertilized, or, I noticed that your snow needed to be removed, or I think I see a loose shingle, or your gutter's falling off, or whatever. Those people usually are looking for business and not necessarily people that you really want to be involved with in terms of having them do work for you. Sometimes people will also talk about a special deal simply because they're in the area. I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, we had a group of roofers come through Colorado, and they were basically just going door to door, knocking on everybody's door, and they had a whole crew. And one of my friends, actually, she didn't bite on this, but she said 3 or 4 different people from that same company knocked on her door over a 2 or 3 week period. So again, they were not only fronting different people to try to get work, but they kept offering her a special deal. We can get the shingles for really free or low cost. We have some extra. They'll be, similar to what your neighbors get. I mean, she said they had an entire scam going. Another thing that that's usually a scam is anytime somebody who is a home repairman asks you to pay in cash, get your antlers up. This is usually a fraud scheme, and don't even go there. Sometimes another part of these scams is the job is bigger than I thought, and so I need more money. Again, not really knowing what they're doing, and so they bite off more than they have the ability to deliver. So another thing that happens sometimes in scams is that they'll charge for new materials or items, and then they will either install used or stolen items. Again, this is one of those things, if you know that you are getting a used gate, and that's what you want to put in, there's nothing wrong with installing a used gate or a used garage door or garage door, but know that you bought used items and that you're not paying for brand new items. So ways to protect yourself. Again, this kind of feels like it's going in a circle, but make sure that you do these things. So ask for the liability insurance certificate. They should be able to provide it. Ask for local references, and don't be hesitant to figure out, if you can, to call them. But don't just call and ask the person. If you call the reference about the previous job, find out things like, you know, what did it cost? Were they able to stay within the cost estimates? Was it done timely? Were they satisfied? Would you hire them again? Were they responsive? What kind of customer service did they provide? All of those kinds of things can help you in terms of making decisions. And I always tell people, follow your gut. If you feel like this is going to be a good fit and somebody that you can work with, then please feel free to go ahead. If you feel like this is somebody that is not honest, or that you're going to have trouble with, then please don't follow through with that. So in ending, there's a couple of things that we just made available in terms of resources. There's a lot of different consumer protection resources that are available. This particular link happens to take you to the Denver District Attorney's Office, but I know that there are many other district attorneys and other consumer protection groups out there. And one of the things that is really important is that if you are working with either licensed or unlicensed people, and they know that you're looking to do your due diligence and you have your homework done, that will better inform, that you will be better informed, and people who are not necessarily out for your best interest probably will be scared away. It's a little more work on your part, but well worth it. Another thing that you can do is that, especially in large cities, but I think this happens in other parts of the state as well, is that there are, again, different fraud activities going on, if you will. So the Denver DA's office does what they call fraud alerts. And this can be all the way from Social Security to roofers coming to town to people who are landscape folks. So it can be any number of different types of groups that are looking to take advantage of people. And so the Denver District Attorney puts out these fraud alerts. The whatever the judicial district is for Arapahoe and Douglas County also puts out some really good resources as well. So that kind of brings us to the end of those formal comments and questions comments related to minor home repairs. Just in closing, I just wanted to give you a quick summary of a couple of the programs that we offer. So we do vision, hearing, and dental grants. The vision and hearing are in Metro Denver. The dental grants are in Metro Denver and the Western Slope, south of I-70 and west of I-25. We have a telephone buddy program where you can either volunteer or you can receive a telephone call from a volunteer once or twice a week. We do quite a bit of work on advocacy. We have a housing coalition and a multi-generational housing coalition, as well as a senior advocacy core that we work with in terms of trying to affect public policy and different, not only bills, but also the writing of rules. We do some work in the area of advanced care planning, helping people with understanding powers of attorney, filling out pre-printed forms, working with people on advanced directives and what kinds of care that they would like in their later years, as well as referrals to attorneys for wills and estates. We provide some general counseling and referral services for any number of issues associated with aging issues. And we do some professional training and consultation. A lot of that work is in leadership, working with assisted living, long-term care, and diverse communities. And thank you all for attending. And with that, I'm going to